So we're going to circle this thing around back to the kind of overarching view. So we got a couple topics here that could be for anybody and everybody, but now we're going to go at this from a Christian perspective.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, let's try this thing out. So
I think like most Christian women they're looking for a spiritual leader in their family. And so like I guess this last item is looking for some things that would lead you to think he's a good spiritual leader. And these would be red flags that would think he would not be a leader. So we kind of had written down lacking like habits that would imply he is a good spiritual leader, such as like regular prayer reading, church attendance, or has like a small group of men. Part of that comes into the quality friends. Does he have quality Christian male friends around him? Because if he does, that's likely going to be a very good sign.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. I think man, like a good Christian. We look at the church. We look at like, and I see this happen all the time in churches nowadays, or in like Christian-based relationships. I just say, many times the male will just he looks at Christ. He's like, oh, he's self-sacrificing dude. I can't stand when I call Jesus a dude. But this guy, the King of Kings, laid his life down, and I'm supposed to emulate that somehow, right? What does that mean? And they get sort of fixated with the sacrifice part, and they don't understand that, like, and this is going back to what we were just talking
doormat
about.
part, calling warrior part.
The woman, not even just calling her on a BS, but leading, being able to lead. So when you see a Christian dude who's doing all the devotions, the prayer stuff, and all that, but he's lacking that taking initiative during those hard moments where he's like, you're the wife, you have your role, I have my role. Now this is my time to be able to say yes or no, a hard yes or no on a situation, which we as men have to be able to do, and women have to be able to trust. Because if they're not trusting that their husband can say yes or no and have those hard situations, then they're not trusting that God put the man there with a purpose to do that. And so, in effect, it's not that they're just mad at their husbands. They're actually mad at God. They're actually mad at God for saying, well, this man is taking liberties right now because I don't have the full picture. And God's like, well, yeah, I put him there to protect you during these search situations so that you would listen to him. Because sometimes if there's I heard a story when I was younger. My dad was like, sometimes you don't ask why. You just need to listen. And he's like, if I say duck and you don't duck, somebody's shooting, you might get shot, and there's not enough time in that scenario for me to explain why. And that's my job as a father. You need to trust me when I tell you to do something, not just say why. The why can come later. And so for women, if you have that man who's doing his daily devotions and has a living relationship with Christ, and he has those moments to try and say, here's what's going on, and it's not that I'm coming down on you. This is for us, and I'm actually playing my role the way God intended it to, and he can do that. That's one indicator you found a man who's doing the right thing. But if you find a Christian dude who's just like can't do that, then he's a little broken in that area. Maybe he's just focusing on the self-sacrifice part in all the wrong ways, because Jesus does a lot more than just that. So I would say that if you're trying to evaluate a man, sometimes you'll see a man who's like got all the devotionary things there, but he's missing some of that manhood that Christ has in our lives. And I see a lot in the Western church where he's not able to lead, and the wife is okay with that, and it's just like it's a little broken for that reason. And it's like you'll be a lot happier following him because you got trust in him, and then your relationship looks stronger because you trust in each other. And then you get through enough of those moments where he's got your best interest in mind.
Well, you should be able to talk about stuff. Like, that's what it's all about. It's like, yeah, like you should be able to have – a woman shouldn't just be like, I've got the answer, neither should the guy. I mean, like, if they do have that, does happen. I'm not saying it does not happen.
Well, take, for instance, a hypothetical. Like,
but you should be able to have a conversation about it. I know a lot what you're saying is a lot of guys end up just letting the wife call the shots.
Yeah.
Whether it's the budgeting, whether it's like where the kids go to school, whether it's like a lot of these subjects, there's a lot of guys that don't give they don't have the time or they don't care about. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. But it definitely is one of those things. It's like it should be equally yoked in a lot of things. There's two perspectives that go along.
I'm not
with
saying
it.
It's not. I'm saying it's yoked in the proper identities that God has given you.
Right, because in the churches you see women leading pretty much everything,
and that's not necessarily. That's not right. according to the Bible. Yes, they lead some. It's not a. We're not keeping checks and balances
Because what you're saying
We're
is
trying to
like,
say that
there's a
when-
lot of guys that actually do have like good prayer lives intact.
but
actually have
they're
devotions.
actually neglecting that.
They
part.
have like they're neglecting the sort of like being
Yeah.
able to voice. And
Okay,
sort of
so I'm
like
going to bring up
assert.
assert, and their wives don't like it when they do. So
That's
I
not a
mean,
good thing.
But
dude.
look. So hypothetical here,
Turning your guy
say for
into
instance,
chopping his nuts off.
castration, spiritual castration. Well, and what you're doing is anyway. Point is, little hypothetical for you guys here. Like, think about this: what if wife wants to go to one church, husband wants to go to another church, kids stuck in the middle? What do you do? Right? The husband is supposed
Nobody
to
goes to church.
The husband is supposed to evaluate that spiritual situation and make the choice. It's a hard one to swallow, but that's what's supposed to happen in a properly healthy, functioning relationship. You're not supposed to allow them to go to different churches. They're supposed to be unified as a family and go together. And that decision, it's a tough one because she might like the worship more in this one. He might say the teaching is better in this one. What comes in as top priority? Teaching. So we're going to go to this church, right? Those are the situations where you need spiritual leadership for it to happen. And if the husband's not taking initiative, he's not reading, he's not praying, he's not got a living relationship with God, then he's not entitled to make those decisions. And the wife who has a living relationship probably knows the better church to go to. So you have to evaluate it from the relationship with Christ before you say, what's going on here in this relationship?
So this is
Right.
pretty far down into the relationship. Let's say they just met. Just how you doing? Met at church, which never happens. But let's say we met at church, right? And you're talking to the girl, and you're like, yeah, you're just trying to sort out like, what is she? Is she a cookie cutter Christian? Is she just like here with her parents? Does she actually have a relationship with Jesus? Like, does she read her Bible? How close is she? Like, how important is this to her? Is she whack? Is she not? You're trying to assess like where her priorities are within like why you guys even met at church, right? So like, what are some like red flags for a dude? That's in church that looks good. He's dressed
You
up
should probably
nice.
finish the female side though.
Well, we were here on the dudes. We could. I mean, we could kind of go
it's
down.
tempting. Let's do the
Though
dudes,
they're kind of both similar, but
Yeah.
we're here on the dudes anyway. So like,
They are similar.
we'll do the dudes. But I'm just gonna act like I'm a chick. You know what I mean? He looks good. He's dressed up. He knows a couple Bible verses. He knows he prays before dinner, right, and that kind of stuff, right. But then I'm gonna probably want to know like when does it get real? It's usually within like trials and like tribulation. It's like
Test
in the
of
tough
faith,
times.
right?
You know what I mean? It's like did he just grow up? Is he one of those like guys that grew up in church? Those really good lives. You know what I mean? Like maybe
We're
too
not
good.
talking about you, Mike.
I'm not talking about Mike.
I'll take it.
But like has he been? Because that's not fair. Mike's been through some serious.
No, of course he has.
So, but the idea is I would try to probe in and try to see like where's the root? Is it a deep one? Is it not a deep one? You know what I mean? I'd probably ask those questions.
Maybe you could throw out a couple like
hypotheticals.
What would you like? Take some bait. I don't know how bad that is. Maybe it's bad. I don't want to be careful, but like somebody you just meet to try and fish the truth out of them. Be like, I don't think daily devotions and prayer are that important.
Because it gets so weird.
I don't
though.
think you really need it.
It gets so
to go to
weird.
heaven, right? And then see how they respond. Maybe they'll be like, "You got this seriously, my brother, my sister. Like it's time to talk." And then that would be like, "Well, this person actually cares about me. I'm just a person in the church, and they want me to have a closer relationship with God. That's cool." Sort of throw out ask some questions the way that goes down. But as far as like the fake Christians, I hate using that word because
The cookie
it's like
cutters.
I'm the cookie cutters. But like if I saw, because this is rough, man. Because like I know I could be indicted on so many.
Oh,
things.
so that's what I'm saying.
Because like that's what
I'm
I'm
talking
saying.
about. I'm talking
Yeah,
for
yeah.
some of those guys
Yeah,
out there.
yeah,
Some
because-
of like what I would be looked at. They'd probably be like long hair, occasionally curses, and smoke some weed. Definitely going to hell. And, don't listen to this guy.
He
at
likes
all.
the metal guitars. This
He
guy
listens to heavy
of
metal.
the devil.
He
That's-
writes heavy metal. Devil's music. What are you
Right.
talking
So
about?
like I think that's more or less social convention associated with cliche, and that's not what we're talking about. So like as a
that's
real,
why I bring it up.
right? No, I agree. That's why it's an essential part to being able to evaluate a person with a living, walking, breathing relationship with Christ. So they can look sort of repellent, according to your culture and whatever you're coming from.
I think one way at some point have them tell them your testimony.
That's a great one.
I think how they describe that and what they talk about, I think would tell you a lot about how real their relationship is.
Definitely.
Because
That's
it's going to be so
easy one.
different for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
It's like there's not this one mold you can just jack on them and be like, oh, but when you hear them talk about,
Mm-hmm.
you know if that guy saved his life or not.
Yeah, that's so true.
You'd be like, I wouldn't, you'll know right off the bat, this is real, dude. This guy's here because.
yeah, and if
of
they
the
tell you to
Jesus.
watch a YouTube video of them doing it, just be careful with that. I'm just kidding. Shout out to you, Phil. So yeah, testimonies are important. Where did God meet you? Who is God to you now?
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about that. That's a really intimate
Yeah,
way
because
to
if they're
talk,
if
too.
they're
I mean,
if they're
that's
using a
just-
lot of like the terminology, if they're using that Christianese that's so often like they use it at church.
it's like a script.
It's a script. Everyone agrees with it. They're like, you know what? We're on the same page, baby, and that feels good. It feels good. It feels good. It's non-threatening, and it's everyone's using the same words. All right, we're on the same boat. Everyone's happy. Once again, good vibes.
Yep.
We're all about these good vibes here in church
Yeah.
too, man. It's like don't say anything that's really
another idea I had
same
was-
Christianese.
Yeah.
If you meet this Christian dude and he's saying all the right things, go on his Instagram and see what he follows.
That's a good one.
I think if
That's
you
a
got this
good one.
Christian guy and he's just following a bunch of like thoughts and ridiculous stuff, like that'll tell you a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
see
his
who he
posts,
follows.
and his
There's a bunch
posts.
of chicks, dude, or is he following like Stoics and like philosophers
Yeah.
or like,
Mhm.
nature stuff or like what's he following? That's a great one, dude.
Yeah.
That's a really good insight on the
well,
social media.
Appetites, what you're
Right.
attracted
And
to,
one thing I was
yeah.
trying to get at with the Christianese thing is
Uh-huh.
if it's authentic, you'll hear them using words that are not Christianese within their testimony.
True.
It'll be like
True.
more of a real story.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then you'll see the work that's been done within that story as like being more authentic because they're not painting with using
Yeah.
the same colors everyone is. It's like those are the colors that were available at the time and that's what happened,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's fair because there's pressure from the church to fit in. And if you can talk individually with your uniqueness that God gave you, then that's a sign of spiritual maturity.
Right, because we don't want these guys to be fitting in all the
Yeah,
time.
that's
You know what I
right.
mean? We want our Peters, we want our Pauls.
Oh,
We want these guys, we want our King Davids. You know what I mean? We want these guys to be able to stand out, even if the church is going wrong, and be able to call the
I'd
church
say-
out. We always hear about the church calling out the people in the church, but we're supposed to call the church out. It's like government and people. Like the church was made for the people. Government was made for the people. It shouldn't get those roles reversed, and the way that things are
Mhm.
going.
That's true.
So, like, you need to have a man with some cojones that's able to be like, man, this church is not for us, babe. Like, I know you like the worship and stuff, but half the stuff that's going on in here is not
Ain't
for us.
kosher, man.
So you got to have a guy that's able to disagree and use and be real with what's going on around him, and not just
Sure.
be like a Christianese parrot talker.
Yeah.
that looks
think,
good on Sundays.
Yeah.
I think another one that we had on that same point, it'd be not immediately a conversation, but if he takes the lead on setting like sexual boundaries, I think
That's
would
a
be
great one.
a great sign because
Let's talk about that one because
and-
sex is such a big deal in today's world.
Yeah,
it's
I think
always
we'll
been
just
a
set
big
this-
deal. I am not
we'll
a
just-
virgin. I can't. I have trouble even understanding how to remain before marriage. It seems like the most hardest impossible thing in the world, but it's absolutely possible.
Yeah,
And there's a lot of guys
We're
that
not
do
going
this.
to sugarcoat that. These if you're a Christian and think you don't have to wait till marriage, you just lying to yourself
Yep.
because that's completely you're lying to yourself.
Yeah.
It's not biblical.
Well, I mean,
that's for sure.
Go ahead, Mike.
And so if the guy somewhat upfront sets those expectations, I think that'd be a huge green flag.
Mm-hmm.
And if he doesn't, I don't know if I'd necessarily view it as a red flag because you might not want to bridge the or that's an awkward conversation. But you could you could test the guy. Like I've had girls test me. Like they'll just kind of in some way throw out that they have that expectation
Mm-hmm.
and just see his reaction.
Yeah. Yeah.
Might as well lay that out there pretty soon too, because it's like if you're getting 5
I
dates into
agree.
this and wasting your time because he's going to have the expectation of not waiting, what are you doing?
What are you
Right,
doing?
it's
Why
a
are you
little
doing it?
bit of a-
I think to try and really push this home for the younger guys, and I can speak for the guys right now. I know women have sexual gravity that's probably as hard to deal with as ours, but it can work,
I
man.
don't think so.
And I think that a lot of what we believe in as men and women of faith is that God has a process to things that if we go by, we're going to have the most fulfillment. And fulfillment in a relationship is it's what ends up getting you through the hard
Well, we've
times.
talked about this
So
quite a bit.
when I look at sex, it's the consummation of a relationship. So it's important to realize what that is. Consummation means like to connect. It's this conciliatory. It's like the emblematic part of it all. And it's an action. It's a real action. When you look at what it means to engage in another person that way under those circumstances, it is the most special thing you can do. And so,
if you have
save
somebody that's saving it, it's even all the more special. It's
It
a
is.
sign that they're going to respect you
Mm-hmm.
and your relationship so much more that they're able to put their animalistic. I mean, as a man, we have so much testosterone. It's funny. It reminded me of that video you sent me of that one chick that actually got on like what was it? It was like she had a hormone therapy
It
going
was the
on.
doctor was talking about these trans women she dealt with who had taken testosterone. Would that be the term, trans women? I don't know how that works, but trans man, I don't know. But
A
anyway,
man
all these
that's now a
women,
woman. 'Cause
no,
of-
No,
all
a
these
woman
women
that's trying to go, dude.
Oh,
all
that's
these
what I meant.
women
That's
that
what I meant.
took testosterone apparently reported like almost some of them are just shocked at what happened to their sex drive, and they're like, "Oh, now I understand what's going on in their brain."
Yeah, that's what I was
it
about
be
to call you
cool,
out,
like,
John. When you're like, they have
Did
the
you
same
watch
desires.
that movie?
No.
It's called like Spiderhead or something. It's got Chris Hemsworth in it, and he's got all these people attached to this drug tool. It's like on their spine, and he'll like release drugs in them, and they have these results, right? So one's love, another one's this, all this stuff. But it'd be interesting to see if some females could actually interact with our reality for a second and be like, "That's okay."
Well, just
perhaps
imagine
she
being a
actually-
female for a second. Like, you don't have the sex drive males have. Males do have this giant sex drive, so you have like ultimate power. You're just like,
Oh my gosh!
I can dominate you. I know I'm not going to have this like this passion within
That's
me.
funny.
But as a woman, it's a good thing if you could see a man sort of like tame that shit
That's
down.
right. Yeah.
Well, you
You
would
know,
have like
for
the
a
trust. The
relationship.
trust would be like that'd be the biggest form of trust. Like you don't have to worry about this guy probably cheating on you.
Mhm.
Like ever.
Oh, that's a good
if
point.
he's willing to
That's a
like
good point.
wait, like those kinds of threats, I would think would be kind of gone.
Yeah, but I think that
And
what happens in the relationship itself is you're trusting God. He told you to do something, and you're being obedient. I don't know that there's much more we have to say about that than and it's so funny because we have to elaborate on these things to push points home. But ultimately, when God tells you to do something, you do it. We talked about baptism a while back, and it's like, do you think everybody knew why they had to be baptized and all these, like, the fine print in it all and the purpose? They just did it because Jesus said to do it or the disciples said to do it. They were
Mhm.
obeying truth. And then all that other stuff comes, and so it'd be so nice to hear more from these people who've waited and adhered to this process that Christ has for us so that you could understand some of what we have to gain, because the world is so ripe with all the stories of promiscuity and child taste testing and you deserve this and this is proper and it's actually going to help you pick the right mate. Like it's just crazy. At the end of the day, we don't have enough of those stories that are, and it's because it's the finer path. It's the narrow gates.
Well, I like to
narrow
go
path.
into some of those finer paths in the church that get married in like 3 months just so they can, their hormones are blasting.
No, it happens
We
all
just
the time.
addressed this with the girls and the boys. It's like they're very young. Let's say they're 18, whatever, 22. And then here they are. They find someone in church they're attracted to.
Can you imagine how
Right.
hard it is to be
And
parents
then
of
they're
that
like,
kind of
"We're
situation?
attracted, we're attracted, and their hormones are flying. They're immature, dude. And they're like, what else do we have to wait for? Let's get married, right?
Yeah.
A lot of these relationships work. I'm not going to say they
I
don't.
think the majority of
A
them
lot
do.
of them do, but you do see this. What I'm trying to get at is that sometimes people get married to have sex
Mhm.
in the Christian community, and that is not okay.
Well, I mean, it's a piece of the puzzle.
I kind of think like God obviously designed these cocktails in their brain for a reason. I
Yeah.
kind of think
I agree. They're
he-
motivators.
they're motivated.
Why are they
You could
there?
say that.
Why are they there? I think it's probably to make us like go at or like commit to each other.
But you have to think, like, if you really wanted to take this apart, it only works under the circumstances of a relationship that accepts sex as a consummation and is going to be final. It doesn't work in the sense of having multiple partners and being promiscuous. That's where you enter into trouble.
Mhm.
Because, yeah, it's a motivating factor. But I think, again, this is where Satan, this is his rules, this is his world, because, like, if we grew up in a village or a city where that was the way it was done, I'm sure in those church situations like Joe was talking about, you'd be more selective with your mate too. You'd
What about
understand.
Old
You
Testament?
take your time with that. What about Old Testament?
What about concubines and like multiple wives?
Dude,
Like, how did that change from the New Testament from the Old Testament?
it was always bad. Like, you're not going to see in the New Testament laws about cutting somebody off in traffic. Okay? And you can hear an amen in the crowd when you hear that because it's like,
Amen.
I done did that. But, there's this elevation of conscience in regard to right and wrong that Christ expects us to know. So, I mean, like having a relationship when you're spread out and you're having this is where self-examination is required. Because what does this process of perfection look like in the long run? Is we're getting better at recognizing sin. So there's like easy sin that we first go into once you're saved, right? Like these gimmies, right? The 10 Commandments, whatever. But cascading underneath these 10 Commandments are all of these like nuanced versions of these things. Like Christ said, it starts in the thought. A lot of people are like, well, when I steal something, that's when I've sinned. It's like, no, that's actually the last sin in a link of sinning that started with you thinking about stealing that object.
A lot of
There's
sin.
actually a lot more sin going on than that. And that's what you begin to understand as you get more mature in Christ. That's what also makes you humble, and that's what also makes you bold. Because when you're humble, you understand that this is where you're at, but it makes you bold because Christ is helping you to see deeper. So when I look at the concubines of the Old Testament, what I understand is the Old Testament tells us stories not in the way that we do now with a lot of like commentary and example, but we have to look at the story and say, what has it done for the person? Every single time we see somebody with a lot of wives or concubines, it creates disruption in their life. And we know that because all of the stories follow that same exact example. So while they weren't saying this is overtly wrong, what they're saying is like, well, what do we know? Sin leads to death. Being obedient leads to life. So if I have some of these things in my life that I'm doing that are obviously leading to death, it might not be like underlined as a sin in the Bible, but God gave you a conscience and he put it in your heart so you know it is. You know it's not for you to do. So don't do it because it's going to lead you down to the death. So like concubines, the kings and these guys were allowed to have them. They're allowed to have a bunch of them. But did it make their relationship with God better? No. Usually they believed like with Solomon, he had wives that believed in other things that affected him.
I think it's cultural differences too of the times.
Oh,
Kind of like slavery was fine then. And it's not like the New Testament went and said slavery is nope. Like there's
Paul specifically
there's
says
specific-
honor your master. and
yeah,
all
it
kinds of
talks
stuff.
about-
But he also says there's no slave. He talks about that, and he also talks about masters being and those slaves. To be honest with you, weren't the slaves
They're
in
like-
the New
yeah,
Testament
they're
were
like
not the
indentured
same.
service.
Yeah, they were not. They had more rights. than-
yeah.
Still a slave, dude.
I'm just saying, dude. That when you,
It's not sugarcoated.
I'm not sugarcoating it, dude.
They were
When
not
you-
free people.
No, and neither are we under our circumstances. If you think
That's
about
a
it.
fact.
Yeah, we're not that free either. You
Nope.
don't even really own this house. You
Don't
don't
own
really,
anything.
you don't pay your bills. You're going to be in trouble. So like it's the same thing. I'm just being honest, right?
Oh my
So,
god.
yeah, it's a mind blower, right? You
Yeah.
are a slave. We are slaves to certain things. But what I'm trying
Let's
to
go
express,
back to purity, though.
what I wanted to, because I think Mike brings up a good point, is like we do have to evaluate the text from a cultural, not a time period,
Mhm.
and certain things. But I do want to make sure the listeners know that when Paul says stuff like there is no Jew, Gentile, slave, or all these things, and he makes sure that people are being treated fairly, that's an indication that people shouldn't lord themselves over people. And you don't have to know you're a slave to be a slave. There's plenty of churches out there where a leader is sort of exalted into a position and he lords over people, and people accept that. We see that all the time, and they don't have a bond.
It's called tyranny.
Yeah, it's tyranny. It's
Yeah.
fascism.
A lot of people love it.
apparently so. Because there's
It's
a lot
easy.
of,
You don't have to
What-
make your own
Yeah,
decisions.
what
exactly.
level if slavery is like 100% taxation, what level of taxation is slavery? I guess is the better question.
Full taxation.
No, it wouldn't even be, because technically a slave, you're getting a place to stay and you're getting food. So you get some income because you're not just like dying.
You're persisting in life. 'cause
Yeah,
it's
you're
good.
getting sustenance, you're alive, and so they're getting quote housing and food paid for as a slave. So then it's like, what level of taxation would be slavery?
I think a lot of it
70,
has to
80%?
do with
Mhm.
the interest
Basic needs.
of whose interests are being. I guess my answer would be like whose interests are being most paid attention to. So am I feeding this guy just so he has enough to live to go plow my field?
3 grains of rice.
Right, that's it. Like exact macros for expenditure. Like, God, that might as well be hell. But so I'd say
this is a total tangent. Too.
It is a tangent. But no, we can try and relate it back, because it's kind of fun. Because we are all slaves to certain things, I think that's what we're trying to realize. And this is what the question is like, how much is it doing for you? Like, if I'm playing guitar or playing video games, or I'm slave to something, my dopamine processes have turned me into a slave for something. You do have to ask yourself, how much is this giving back to my life, right? So I think that's something we all need to exercise. So I'll just kind of leave that.
That's why
as
fasting,
nice
if your man is like, you meet him at church and he's like, I'm on a 3-day fast. Be like, that's a good sign.
Yeah.
He's able to put his shit in order for 3 days
That
and,
is pretty
abstain and actually have some willpower, because willpower is so important. I think that's kind of what we're getting at. If you want to be a man, you better have willpower on your side. You better be able to abstain. Like, when that goes into purity,
yeah,
those things are a big deal.